This dog waited at the door every single day for 3 years.
When his owner finally came home, what the dog did next stunned everyone.
For 3 years, he kept something no one knew about.
That night, the dog led him to something he had forgotten. He waited 3 years, but in the end, love won.
3 years is a long time. Long enough for neighbors to move away. Long enough for a house to feel different. Long enough for most people to forget. But not for a dog. When Daniel Carter left his small hometown in Oregon, he didn't know he'd be gone that long. At first, it was supposed to be 8 months. Then the contract overseas was extended. Then something went wrong. A business deal collapsed, his passport got tied up in legal issues, and suddenly months turned into years. Back home, everyone assumed he wasn't coming back. Everyone except Rusty. Rusty was a golden retriever Daniel had rescued as a puppy from a shelter off Highway 26. The dog had been sick, scared, and shaking in the corner of a metal cage. Daniel had knelt down, looked him in the eyes, and said, "Hey, buddy, let's go home." From that day on, they were inseparable, until the day Daniel had to leave. The morning he left for the airport, Rusty sensed something was wrong. Dogs always do. He followed Daniel from room to room, tail low, ears back, watching every movement. When the suitcase rolled across the wooden floor, Rusty let out a small, confused whine. "I'll be back before you know it," he had said, kneeling down, hugging him tight. Rusty didn't understand the words, but he understood goodbye. After Daniel left, Rusty stayed with Daniel's mother, Helen. She loved the dog deeply, but she noticed something that broke her heart. Every evening at exactly 6:15 p.m., Rusty would walk to the front door. He'd sit and wait. At first, Helen thought it was routine. Then she realized something else. 6:15 p.m. was when Daniel used to come home from work. Days passed, weeks passed, months passed. Rusty never missed a day. Even during snowstorms, even in heavy rain, even when Helen tried calling him away with treats. He would sit by that door, staring at it like he believed with absolute certainty that it would open. After the first year, neighbors stopped asking about Daniel. After the second year, even Helen stopped saying he'll be home soon. But Rusty never stopped waiting. Then one afternoon, exactly 3 years later, a car pulled up slowly in front of the house. Rusty was lying near the window. At first, he didn't react. Then he froze, his ears lifted, his body stiffened, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't walk to the door at 6:15. He ran. But what happened next, no one, not even Helen, was prepared for. And what Rusty did in that moment would leave everyone in tears. The car door opened slowly. Helen was in the kitchen when she heard Rusty's nails scraping wildly across the hardwood floor. Not the usual calm trot. This was different, urgent, desperate. She rushed toward the living room just as Rusty reached the front door. He wasn't barking. He wasn't whining. He was trembling. Outside, a man stepped out of the car, thinner, older, shoulders heavier than before. His beard was grown out, his face sharper. Life had clearly been hard on him. It was Daniel. For 3 years, he had imagined this moment. He thought Rusty might not recognize him. He thought maybe the dog would hesitate. He even prepared himself for the possibility that Rusty had moved on. But he wasn't prepared for what actually happened.
Before Daniel could even knock, the front door swung open. Helen stood frozen in shock. "Daniel?" she whispered, barely breathing. But Rusty didn't wait for permission. He bolted past Helen like a flash of gold. For half a second, Rusty stopped a few feet away from Daniel. He stared at him, deeply, intensely, as if scanning his soul. 3 years, 3 birthdays missed, 3 Christmases, over 1,000 evenings waiting at 6:15. Daniel slowly knelt down, tears already building. "Hey, buddy." That's when it happened. Rusty didn't jump. He didn't bark wildly like most reunion videos you see online. Instead, he walked forward slowly, almost cautiously, and pressed his forehead against Daniel's chest. Then he collapsed into him, not in excitement, in relief. His entire body shook as he let out a sound Helen had never heard before. Not a bark, not a cry, but something in between, a deep emotional release. Daniel wrapped his arms around him, holding him tight as tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry," he kept whispering. "I'm so sorry I took so long." Rusty pulled back slightly and then did something that stunned them both. He turned around and walked back toward the front door. He sat down and looked at Daniel, like he had one more thing to say, like he wasn't finished. Daniel stood up slowly, confused. "What is it, boy?" Rusty looked at the door again, then back at Daniel, then back at the door. And that's when Helen realized something that made her cover her mouth in disbelief. For 3 years, at 6:15 p.m., Rusty waited at that door. And right now, it was exactly 6:15. Rusty wasn't just greeting him, he was finishing the routine. But what Rusty did next would reveal something even more heartbreaking, something Daniel never knew had been happening while he was gone, and it would change the way he saw those 3 lost years forever.
Daniel's chest tightened as he looked at the clock on the wall. 6:15 p.m. exactly. Rusty was sitting at the door, the same way he had every single evening for 3 years. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Guilt, confusion, gratitude, all at once. "Mom," he said quietly, without taking his eyes off Rusty, "he still does this?" Helen nodded, her voice shaking. "Every day. Doesn't matter if it's snowing, doesn't matter if he's sick. He waits for you." Daniel swallowed hard. But then Rusty stood up again. Instead of scratching the door or asking to go outside, he walked over to a small wooden cabinet near the hallway. He nudged it with his nose. Once, twice. Then he looked back at Daniel. Helen frowned. "That's new." Daniel walked over and opened the cabinet. Inside was something he hadn't expected. Stacks of unopened letters, all addressed to him, his name written in Helen's careful handwriting. Daniel stared at them. "What is this?" Helen hesitated. "You stopped calling after the first year. We didn't know what was happening. I kept writing, just in case you ever came home. I didn't have an address to send them to." Daniel's throat went dry. But that wasn't what caught his attention. Under the letters was his old blue baseball cap, the one he used to wear every single day. Rusty gently grabbed the cap in his mouth and brought it to Daniel. Then he sat down and placed it at his feet. Helen covered her mouth again, tears flowing freely now. "He sleeps with that every night." Daniel knelt down slowly, picking up the cap with trembling hands. It still had faint bite marks on the brim. Rusty hadn't destroyed it, he had protected it. Daniel reached out and stroked Rusty's face. "You kept this for me?" Rusty's tail wagged softly, not wildly, just steady, certain. But then something unexpected happened. Rusty didn't look excited anymore. He didn't look energetic like a dog who just reunited with his owner. He looked tired, very tired. Daniel noticed it now.
the gray around his muzzle, the slower breathing, the slight tremble in his back legs. "How old is he now?" Daniel asked quietly. Helen hesitated. "He turned 11 last month." The words hit hard. 3 years wasn't just time. It was time Rusty didn't have much of left. And that's when Helen said something that made Daniel's heart sink. "The vet gave us some news last week." Daniel looked up sharply. "What news?" Helen took a shaky breath. "They said Rusty's heart isn't doing well. They don't think he has much time." Daniel's world went silent. Rusty had waited 3 years. 3 years! And now, time was running out. But what Rusty did later that night, when everyone thought he was finally resting peacefully, would prove that he hadn't just been waiting. He had been holding on for something, and Daniel was about to find out what.
That night, Daniel didn't unpack his suitcase. He didn't check his phone. He didn't even shower after the long drive from the airport. He sat on the living room floor with Rusty, just like he used to. Rusty rested beside him, head on Daniel's leg, breathing slow but uneven. Every now and then, his tail would tap softly against the floor, like he still couldn't believe this was real. Daniel kept replaying his mom's words in his head. His heart isn't doing well. 3 years. Rusty had waited 3 years. And now Daniel was being told he might only have weeks, maybe less. Around midnight, Helen went to bed. The house grew quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and Rusty's breathing. Daniel must have drifted off at some point, because the next thing he knew, he felt movement. Rusty was standing. Slowly. Unsteadily. "Hey, buddy," whispered Daniel, rubbing his eyes. "You okay?" Rusty didn't respond the way he normally would. Instead of settling back down, he looked toward the hallway. Then he started walking. Not toward the door this time, toward Daniel's old bedroom. Frown didn't follow. The room hadn't changed much. Same faded paint, same shelf of trophies from high school baseball, same framed photo of Daniel holding Rusty as a puppy. Rusty walked inside and stopped near the closet. He looked back at Daniel, then gently pawed at the bottom drawer of an old dresser. Daniel's heart began to race. He hadn't opened that drawer in years. He crouched down and pulled it open. Inside was something he had forgotten about completely. A small red notebook, his old journal. Daniel picked it up slowly, dust rising in the dim light. "I haven't seen this in forever." Rusty sat down beside him, watching. Daniel flipped it open. The first few pages were random thoughts, goals, plans, dreams about starting his own business overseas. But then he reached a page dated the night before he left. His handwriting was rushed. "If this works out, I'll come back and buy that land near the lake. Big yard. Rusty can run every morning. No more apartments. No more rushing. Just us." Daniel's chest tightened. He had forgotten that promise. He had chased opportunity, chased money, chased proving himself. And somewhere along the way, he stopped chasing what mattered. Rusty slowly lowered himself onto the floor beside him, as if he just needed Daniel to remember. And in that quiet moment, Daniel realized something that hit harder than anything else. Rusty hadn't just been waiting at the door for 3 years. He had been holding on to a promise. But what happened the very next morning, when Daniel made a decision no one saw coming, would prove that sometimes love doesn't need years. It just needs one choice. And that choice was about to change everything.